Well, welcome, folks. This is Lowell Ann, and welcome to this Being Your Own CEO interview series. My goal is to introduce solo entrepreneurs by giving them some profile on Google Plus and on YouTube. I think that there's a great potential here for us all to connect in a more real way with our potential clients. So I love finding out what makes solo entrepreneurs tick. And so I thought it would be really fun to have this interview series. So today I would like to introduce to you Heidi Kuster. Welcome, Heidi. How would you like to tell us all about what's the name of your business and what is it you do in your business?
Well, thank you very much, Lolan. I really appreciate your inviting me to do this hangout. It's very generous of you to reach out to other solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, to help them spread the word about their business. I really want to commend you on that. My business is called In Your Corner Virtual Assistant Services. And In Your Corner is all about supporting small businesses. We provide administrative support remotely to clients. So we are your Girl Friday for hire. So anything that you would hire an office assistant to do, you can hire a virtual assistant to do. And the difference being that virtual means that we have our own equipment, we have our own office, we're trained professionals that are available to work with you on a contract basis. So for example, at In Your Corner, we work with clients on a monthly basis. So there is generally a minimum amount of hours per month. However, there is no long-term commitment. So you can work with us for 1 month, 3 years, 6 months. We have clients that their businesses have peak periods. So we'll work together, let's say for their busy season is 4 months a year. And so they come back to us at each busy season, which is pretty exciting. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling. Sorry, this is my first interview. So does that help?
Yes. So when you say that you do it virtually, it means that you do it remotely. So how does that work? Do you connect with that other person by email or by phone or using a Skype or Hangout, or how does that work?
Well, luckily in this day and age, there are, endless tools to help us access information and connect with people. So most of the time, it's a simple thing like email or text messaging or a phone call. There are things like there's a program called Log Me In, which allows a person which allows the virtual assistant to log into the other person's computer. So for example, I have a client and I work on their bookkeeping for them. I do expenses and it's all in QuickBooks on their computer. So I use Log Me In, and that allows me to remotely access their computer. And I remember the first time I saw this happen, like when someone was helping me on my computer, they come in and they start moving your mouse around. So only one person can be using the computer at a time. But that's just one example. There's another program called Team Viewer. And again, it allows me to access someone else's desktop so that I'm able to use all of the programs on their computer and access all of their information, all of their files, etc., that I might need for whatever projects I'm working on. Google Docs is really helpful, like Google period. There's Google Drive. That's a great tool for sharing information. The nice thing about Google Sheets, for example, is that when you're working on, you know, Google Sheets is a similar program to Excel. And so when you're working on inputting data, for example, for clients, or sharing data and any kind of record keeping that you're updating, the benefit to using Google Drive is that you can't overwrite one another. So it keeps the information accurate. Whereas a program like Dropbox, which is, again, another great tool for working remotely, Dropbox allows people to share files.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great when you want to access, you know, large amounts of information. However, if more than one person is accessing a file, it will create double files in order to prevent erasing any information or overwriting any information.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm opening a file and looking at it in Dropbox, and my client is also looking at that same file, it creates two files. And then it can be a little confusing to get back to, okay, which was the original file and what needs to be put where. So Dropbox is amazing for sharing information, but my experience has been that when I'm collaborating on information, Google Drive can be a lot safer, a lot easier, and more accurate.
Mm-hmm. So that, I hope, gives our viewers a better understanding of the kinds of tools that a virtual assistant would use. So, and I know that as a solo entrepreneur myself, that I use a number of those tools as well. So it really means that to be a solo entrepreneur, sometimes we need to at least understand how all these things work, though not necessarily have to do it ourselves when we have someone like Heidi, who can sort of jump in and get the work done. So so that's great. I loved hearing how you do that. And by the way, I think the name of your business is just says it all, doesn't it? In your corner.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it certainly
that was the goal.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think that any prospective clients might like to know a little bit about you personally, Heidi. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about where you came from. Well, first of all, maybe we need to both say on today's date, in May of 2015, we're both in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And so,
that's right, beautiful Victoria, BC.
Our city of our beautiful city of flowers. But so there, we've got that out of the way. So where did you come from, Heidi?
Originally, I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the first time I came to the island, as an adult, I was 18 years old, and I traveled to Nanaimo, which is up island from Victoria, and just fell in love. It was so beautiful. I'd never been by the ocean like that, and I was just, my breath was taken away, and I vowed that I would someday live there. And it took a number of moves, Lolan, I have to tell you. Like, I started moving to the island when I was 19, and the last time I came here I was 25, but now I've been here for like 21 years, so it was well worth it, definitely.
Yes, I don't know of anybody that comes to the island that doesn't think that they'd like to live here. For those people who are not in Canada, this little corner of Canada, which is on the west coast, or the left coast as some people refer to it, is probably the warmest part of the country. So we have very easy winters here. And in fact, you could, if you've lived anywhere else in Canada, you probably wouldn't call this winter. So, yeah, I understand that feeling. We all feel that way. So you grew up in Edmonton and you went to college there, etc. And I must share with our viewers that I did send some questions along to Heidi. So I'm referring to her answers to my questions. But one of the things that you mentioned that you've been your very first job, and I just thought that is so fits with who you are that you really must tell that story.
Oh, thank you. It was very interesting. One of the first profiles I worked on, like business profiles online, I was talking with somebody and this story came up and they're like, oh my God, you have to write that down. My very first job, 12 years old, I worked in an office. And to be honest, I didn't even have my social insurance number. I was, as they say, working under the table. But I got a job working in an insurance office, and I was what they call a gopher. You go for this and you go for that, and I made coffee and I answered phones and I sorted mail and I did filing and I did whatever was asked of me, and I absolutely loved it. It was a brilliant experience to go out in the world. At 12 years old, I was quite mature for my age, and to learn something new and to learn about business. And here was this man, and he had his own business, which flabbergasted me because I'd never met anyone that had their own business. My dad worked for the union and my mom had worked for hotels. So this was my first experience with an entrepreneur. And I guess, you know, like having the independence that comes with making your own money through work, I was bitten, and I loved the freedom and the idea that someday I would be an entrepreneur myself. I don't know if it formulated at that first stage, but certainly it was always a secret dream of mine to start a business. And I didn't start this business until I was in my early 40s, and that's pretty much how long it took me to work up my confidence to jump out there and take a risk and do it.
Well, and that's really a nice segue into another question that I had, and that was, well, what made you decide to go into business, and what was that final push that got you there?
I was working as a licensed assistant for a financial advisor. And so I was their main assistant, and it was quite a unique scenario in that I was new to the financial industry and he was a new financial advisor. And we had the opportunity to mentor with his father, who had been a financial advisor for over 25 years. And his assistant, who had been his assistant, I think, for 17 years at that time. And so it was an amazing learning experience. And it was a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. And we were both learning something new, and we worked our way up from the very bottom. And by the time I chose to leave that position, we were looking after 200 families and their investments, which is quite an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. And we had worked through the market crash, which was quite a critical learning curve and a very stressful time in my professional career. Mm-hmm. And I learned just there's so many things that you can learn in when you're under that kind of pressure, you're forced to learn quickly and stay on the move and come up with creative solutions. And it was an exponential growing period. And so after we successfully maneuvered through that situation and things were calmed down again, I had a time to reflect. And even though this was a brilliant company that I worked for and I knew I could stay there as long as I wanted, you know, the remuneration, it was a great paying job. I loved the people I worked with. The dream in the back of my head that I wanted to have my own business, I'm like, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And so that was the catalyst, is I decided to leave and start a business.
Wow. Yes, your phrase, if not now, when? I kind of smiled when I saw that. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the kinds of the different kinds of topics, or the different kinds of things that you actually do. Now you mentioned that you can go in and do the input for QuickBooks, etc. But I noticed that you had well, you had a story here about a favorite client, and I was really impressed with that story, where you and this was your very first out of town client, and I found that interesting as well, because I know you from meeting you and seeing you at various local kind of networking groups, etc., etc. And so, I mean, one of my questions for you was going to be, well, how do you find your clients? And I think it's pretty obvious that you find a lot of them just by networking around town, etc. But here is a story that you had about an out-of-town client and how that all worked. So tell us that story. I thought it was very interesting.
Thank you, Lolan. Yeah, it was quite an amazing experience, in that, as you mentioned, all of my clients I have found through networking face to face, and that is definitely one of my strengths. That's one of the things I most enjoy, is meeting new people and hearing about their businesses. That was one of the crucial or one of the strong draws to having a business. So going out networking, the word gets out about you. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And someone who knew me talked to someone out of town because they were having a problem. They had a problem, and so they needed some help with some paperwork, with some administration.
Oh dear. I think we may have had a freeze up.
Which he knew inside and out, okay? People person, hard worker. However, part of the process was that he would have to complete a mini business plan and fill out various government forms in order to apply for a license to take over the business. And he was pulling his hair out. He was just completely frustrated with the system. He wasn't able to communicate with the different departments that he needed to gather the information of what was required of him, and so he was quite frustrated. So he was talking to his local community futures branch, and my name came up. So they called me and they explained a little bit about the situation and asked if I would be interested in pursuing it. So I talked to the gentleman, and we ended up working together. And it was a real partnership, in that he had all of the information that was necessary. Mm-hmm. The challenge was how to present that information in the way the government would accept it. So he had to, jump through all these hoops to get to where he wanted, and he wasn't good at jumping through hoops. So I did the jumping for him. I gathered all the information from him that they needed, and I wrapped it up and presented it exactly the way the government departments wanted. And in the end, he got his license, and he was thrilled. And it was very, very satisfying, in that, because it wasn't a simple process. It was constantly, like I talked about earlier in my other job, you're under pressure because there was a deadline. And there was the deadline of him wanting to have this business. So the pressure was on, and working through that to keep the creative juices flowing so that, you know, I was asking the right questions and, you know, motivated to go and look in all the different areas and talk to all these different people to get what we needed. And in the end, it was successful. So that was brilliant.
Oh, that's right. And I might just mention, you mentioned Community Futures, and for any of our viewers who are not Canadian, that term probably wouldn't mean very much to them, but Community Futures was a Government of Canada program. I don't know if it's still running or not, but it does provide funding, does it not, for new businesses? Yeah. So
I know for sure they provide information. I don't know how much they provide about funding at this point because I never delved into all of that. But they've got a huge amount of information. Like, for example, in Victoria, we've got the Women's Enterprise Center, and they taught, I believe they teach entrepreneurs as well how to get funding, but primarily I think they're about education.
Mm-hmm.
And they're part of the same branch of as a Community Futures.
Yeah. So I just wanted to raise that, because if you were from somewhere else, you'd be sort of wondering what on earth is Community Futures. So something else that I wanted to ask you. So it sounds as though you're well set up to deal with people outside of Victoria if things come, you know, if they can find out about you. So that's worthwhile for others to know. And the other thing I took out of your message there was that you're not afraid to dive into, you know, some of that more complicated bureaucratic government stuff and pull out what is needed and to figure out how to do that. And that's a real skill, a very valuable skill to have. So I commend you on that one. I thought that was a really neat story. So up at this point, I'm wondering what have you learned about being in business for yourself? What are some of the lessons that you've learned that the solo entrepreneurs that are viewing us right now could take away?
One of the greatest lessons I learned is that in the beginning, you know, when you start something, like you start a business, I had no idea. I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, you have a goal of, like, my goal was I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people. I knew that solopreneurs were feeling overwhelmed because they were on their own and they were becoming successful. So there was more and more and more work to do and only one person to do it. So I knew that they needed some administrative support. And so I jumped in, starting a business, going out, meeting people, shaking hands. But it is the steepest learning curve that anyone can imagine, starting a business. And when I started, I was terrified, and I was terrified to talk to anyone. And the lesson that I learned is that when I actually did confide in another entrepreneur, that I was scared out of my wits and I didn't know what I was doing, they just consoled me and said, "Oh my God, Heidi, of course you are. You wouldn't be a sane person if you weren't terrified. Starting your own business, you're building everything from scratch, you know?" I had a lady tell me once, she was from Europe, and she had her own business, and she said, "Heidi, you eat what you kill." And I thought, oh my God, that's true, because I don't make money unless I go out there and track it down and, you know, talking to clients and tracking down leads. So being able to build a network, like Victoria is a brilliant business community that has been incredibly welcoming to me. And, you know, all of us are in the same boat. If we're solopreneurs, we're working on our own, and that can be lonely sometimes. And, you know, there's questions that you don't have the answer to because it's the first time you've been asked the question. So what I do now is I reach out to this wonderful community that I'm a part of, and I ask for help. And that is the smartest thing that I learned to do. And asking for help can be hiring another professional to do something like, I'm not a graphic designer. I needed a logo, so I hired a graphic designer. They're an expert. And that's what you do. You hire experts to support you in the things that you need that you can't do yourself. And then the other side of asking for help is just, you know, creating your circle of trust, people that you admire and you can trust and you can confide in, and you ask each other questions and you help each other out and support each other through this long working day that it can be as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, asking for help. Actually, I might add another piece to that, asking for help and offering help.
Excellent. Yes. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. And by the way, I don't know if maybe this is the right time. I certainly have in my networks, I've stumbled on people who use Heidi's services and sing her praises to the sky. So
thank you very much, Lolan. That's very kind.
Yeah. So I'm looking at our time here. We've got, maybe a couple of minutes left. Well, first of all, before we get to that question, if somebody who's watching has a need and would like to connect with you, how would you suggest that they do that?
I would suggest that they email me, and my email address is Heidi, HEIDI, at inyourcornerva, which stands for virtualassistant.com. So Heidi at inyourcornerva.com.
And I guess another question that occurs to me that I didn't ask you, but I'm going to ask it as an impromptu. Do you belong to any of the VA networks or associations or any of that? Would that be a way to get a hold of you?
I actually don't belong to any of the associations. I researched them in the beginning, and I've certainly had some contact with them, but I decided not to join. I'm an independent, as they say.
Right. Well, that says something about your confidence in yourself, I think. You thought you knew that you could make a go of it yourself. So that's good. So in the we've got just a couple of minutes left. What would you like to promote before we close?
Thank you, Lolan. What I'd love to promote is one of the great things about being an entrepreneur and networking is that I meet really fascinating people. And I met a lady by the name of Erin Acton, and Erin is a business coach. And she's a lovely woman with a fantastic idea about making coaching more accessible to more people. And one of the ways that she does this is she has coaching parties, which I thought was a delightful plan. And so I'm hosting a coaching party with Erin Acton at my house, May 26th, which is a Tuesday, and it's from 6:30 to 8:30. And Erin has created a fabulous presentation for us about time management, because all of my clients talk to me about they feel overwhelmed and there's not enough hours in the day. So Erin and I thought, well, let's give these busy business women some tools to reclaim their time. So to get out of feeling overwhelmed and get back to feeling in control. And I'm just going to read a bit here of what she says about what the thing I also loved about Erin is that she will provide a customized plan for each person at the party. So they're
Wow.
going to leave the party with a business plan of how to get their time back under control.
Oh, that's a really good takeaway for sure.
Yes.
So I'm looking at our time now, and I think we're just exactly our 30 minutes now. So I want to thank you so much for sharing what you do, Heidi. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better and hearing about how you work and what you've learned, etc. And for those out there, I do encourage you to give some thought to freeing up some valuable time in your business by hiring Heidi as your virtual assistant. So I want to close this session now with an invitation to join my weekly success circle hangout. It's called Being Your Own CEO. And we're there to give and receive support and to help and receive ideas and support from the others that belong. And if you'd like to know more about my solo enterprise programs, be sure to visit my website called loweland.com, which you can see on the screen here. So this is Lowell Ann, your solo enterprise coach, signing off for now. Thanks very much, Heidi.